There's one more piece to the intonation puzzle, and it's not about what you say or why you say it, but about how you say it. This is how you show emotion, which is layered on top of the other types of intonation, like the frosting on a cake. It's the coloring of a thought group or sentence that allows the speaker to modify the intonation in other ways. The exact ways that you manipulate the tone, as well as the overall flow of speech, will produce different emotional effects. Let's first get a general overview of the core intonation system as related to emotional intonation. Like before, we have the same core system that works through structural intonation and attentional intonation, and it still uses the same idea of high, middle, and low. In the case of emotional intonation, it works through energy. It's about what kind of energy you feel and or how much energy you have. The kind of energy will go higher or lower. The amount of energy will make it flatter or more dynamic. One way to look at this is with our ball and gravity idea. If you apply more force, meaning more energy, the ball goes higher off of the ground and or moves faster. That's if you're going higher in pitch. You can also do it going lower in pitch, which would be throwing the ball down. But if you apply little to no energy, it stays closer to where it already is, whether that's higher, lower, or in the middle, and or it moves more slowly. I say stays where it already is because emotional intonation uses a sliding range. For example, calmness is generally flatter and slower, a little more drawn out, but the pitch is a little higher. It's not right in the middle. This creates a very nice, calming sound. So we're not completely flattening the stress of the language, but it's a little more flatter, it's a little more equal and even. Now, on the other hand, depression is also generally flatter, but it feels very low, slow, and heavy because I don't want to say anything. Think of Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh. But there's also another way we can look at this, and both of these ideas are important. Let's look at physics.
Pitch can be high or low, and it corresponds to the frequency of the wave. So air that's vibrating back and forth more times per second will have a higher pitch, and air that's vibrating fewer times per second will have a lower pitch.
So a higher pitch tends to create a more positive or lighter feeling in general. We've seen examples of this with excitement, where you're generally going to be rising, especially on that focus word, and your speech is probably going to be faster. It's like it's vibrating faster. And we also saw this with politeness, where that rise can give it more of a friendly tone. A lower pitch can make things feel heavier and slower. There's a lower vibration of the energy there. Judgment is a good example of this. For example, if I say, "Are you really going to do that? Are you really going to do that?" So there's this sort of downward push, that's the gravity part, but there's this sort of heavier feeling with that lower pitch. Think of a judge and a gavel, or judging. Then there are special cases like anger. Now, anger can be explosive or more simmering, but in explosive anger, there's a lot of upward force. In this case, it's not necessarily lighter or more positive, but there's a quick increase in the amount and force of the energy in an upward direction. So we still see that we have this energy idea, a little bit of this gravity idea in the background, even though we're applying it in a little bit of a special way. Now, if we take both the ball and gravity idea, as well as the physics idea with this vibrational frequency, we can say that in general, the heavier the energy is, the more you get pulled down by gravity. The lighter the energy is, the more you can resist gravity. In the case of something like explosive anger, it's like jumping off the ground with a lot of force or throwing that ball up. In the case of something like calmness, it's flatter and lighter. Now, the flatter you are, the less engaged, the less energy. So if you are flat but super high, this can sound whiny. The lack of energy here is because you really don't want to do that thing. So if I say, "Why? I don't want to do that," It's generally flatter, it's generally higher, but it sounds annoying. We don't like that. Flat plus high is calm. Flat plus middle will sound disinterested, bored, just generally unengaged. You don't care. Because we're not going lighter and more positive, we're not going heavier and more negative. We're sort of keeping it in the middle, but flattening it out, drawing it out. Yeah, that's a cool story. I don't really care. And if you go flat and low, it'll probably sound sad. If you go flat and really low, it'll sound depressed. But that brings up a question. So we saw about going higher, going lower, going higher flat, lower flat, middle flat. But what if we're just in the middle and we're not flat? Well, this would just be a regular sentence or thought with no emotional coloring. I like dogs. Did you see it? Remember, emotional intonation adds color to what you say, but if there's no reason to add color, it's not needed. Note that this isn't a lack of energy, you're just not adding or removing any particular energy from your speech. In other words, you're just using the basic rhythm and structure of the language, the structural intonation and the attentional intonation. Emotional intonation is not something that is required at all times, but it's something that will naturally be added on top based on how you feel about a particular thing in a particular situation. But you have to be careful, because if you speak a language that is maybe syllable timed, or especially if you speak a language like Japanese, which tends to come out a lot flatter when they speak English, when we're flattening things, we're sort of compressing the basic rhythm and stresses, not eliminating them, just sort of compressing them, drawing it out. But if you do that in your normal speech, you will sound bored, and you will also sound boring. It will be harder to follow you because it's all just one big flat thing. So you always still have to use that underlying rhythm of the language, the stresses, the unstresses, the focus words. That's why we talked about that before intonation, and especially why we kept emotional intonation for the last type of intonation. Let's take a look at a couple specific examples. Guess what? What? I got accepted into Harvard. Awesome. And notice that the first person is happy and also very excited because they have this big news, which is really, really great. So their speech is faster. Their tone tends to generally be higher. Guess what? Guess what? It's kind of punchy. I got accepted into Harvard. Blah, 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 blah. Fast. I got accepted into Harvard. I got accepted into Harvard. I got accepted into Harvard. Now, if we break down some thought chunks here, we can see something else interesting that's happening. I got accepted into Harvard. And we can hear that, right? I got accepted into Harvard. I got accepted into Harvard. Oh, I got accepted into Harvard. I got accepted into Harvard. So still, the attentional intonation is there. The structural intonation is still there. We're coloring the sentence and we're coloring those thought chunks. Notice that this sort of punchiness, this excitement, this energy really lands a lot on the focus word. It can color the whole chunk or the whole sentence, but it's really going to be felt mostly on the focus word. I got accepted. I got accepted into Harvard. Into Harvard. I got accepted into Harvard. Let's look at another example. This sucks. What's wrong? Remember how I got accepted into Harvard? Yeah. I actually wasn't accepted into Harvard. They made a mistake. Oh, that sucks. So here we have sort of an opposite example where now we feel very sad, we feel very heavy, there's less energy. So we can hear that the pitch, the tone tends to be lower throughout the whole speech. Just like how with that very excited, energized speech, the sentence can be said really quickly, it gets sort of condensed a bit. The opposite can happen on the other end where things can get kind of drawn out. We take maybe a little bit more time to say things because we're very sad instead of being very happy and wanting to speak a lot. Notice even on some of the focus words here. This sucks. This sucks. Instead of this sucks. This sucks. This sucks. So even on this, it's sort of being drawn out. Everything's being drawn out a little bit. We hear that sucks. It still comes up. It's still the focus, but it's not going to be way up here. Or they made a mistake. They made a mistake. Mistake. Instead of they made a mistake. They made a mistake. That's just normal. If I'm really excited, because the mistake is positive for me in a different case, they made a mistake. 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 So you can hear that sort of emotional coloring throughout the speech. So emotional intonation is literally the energy that we feel in our bodies manifesting itself through our speech using the hidden core intonation system. What I want you to do is start paying attention to the way that natives express emotion. Again, still based on the context and the purpose of expression, but also look at their face, look at the situation. Is it a heavy, negative feeling situation? Is it a light, more positive feeling situation? Pay close attention to these details of emotional intonation, and that's going to take you really far.